In this lecture, we are going to look at statistical hypothesis. A statistical hypothesis is different from research hypothesis. Like we have emphasized that hypothesis can be classified into two types, research hypothesis and a statistical hypothesis. Remember, we say that a research hypothesis does not read any statistical data. In this case, we are talking about statistical hypothesis. A statistical hypothesis expresses relationship between two or more variables in a statistical and measurable terms. They have said it all. In a statistical and measurable terms. The statistical parameter on which the test is to be based is specified, and variables are reduced to numerical quantities. Good, that is about statistical hypothesis. So those parameters, those variables we talk about that you want to use to generate, now we are no longer laying emphasis on them, measuring but what in describing such characteristics, in describing such parameters, we use figures. We have to generate information to talk about the teaching method, for instance, talk about the leadership style, talk about those things. This is the only form hypothesis can be tested. Statistical hypotheses are classified into null hypotheses and the alternative hypothesis. So, unlike a hypothesis where we just have what it is and describe it, in statistical hypothesis, which we say it is the only form in which you can do the testing. This form of a hypothesis or this type of hypothesis, statistical, has two types. It's divided into two types or classes, subclasses. And these subclasses are not known as null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Let us look at null hypothesis as a type of a statistical hypothesis. A null hypothesis is denoted by HO, H and small o. It is a hypothesis of no effects, hypothesis of no difference, hypothesis of no relationship, hypothesis of no influence, and no impact. So just like the word null signifies in this, when you say null, that is absence, none, it's none, nil, zero. So a null hypothesis is denoted by what? HO. At times, students have issue in how to write this. Some write capital H and capital O. No, it is capital H and small o. Then, if you have so many of them, as I'm going to illustrate later, you put, if you have this is 1, you put HO and subscript 1. It is a hypothesis of no effect, like I've said before, no difference, no relationship, and no influence or no impact. Null hypothesis says that there is no significant difference. Remember, I say a test for no difference. So it's not just no difference as you test; it tests for significant difference. So if there is a difference, it does not matter. But we want to know how significant is that difference. If the significance is not noticeable, then it becomes a null hypothesis. We want to look for a no significant effect, no significant impact, no significant influence, as we already mentioned, no significant relationship, no significant influence exists between two or more variables. So in this null hypothesis, which is actually the one we use whenever we carry out our research in academies, we normally prefer and recommend null hypothesis. Hypothesis of no significant relationship, no significant influence, no significant impact, no significant between what? The independent and the dependent variables. So we are talking about null hypothesis, I've said before, is represented by letter capital H and small o. It is non-directional. So it does not show you where you are going. It does not show you that, look at it, does not give you a guide. I would say it is what? Non-directional. 3 different hypotheses can be represented as, like if you have hypothesis 1, 2, 3, 4 or more, you do not come and say number 1. So you don't write 1. The way you tell us you are handling hypothesis 1 is writing HO and subscript 1. Second hypothesis should read like this: HO subscript 2 and the HO subscript, and so on and so forth. Let us look for typical examples. For hypothesis 1, I say there is no, that is, I'm teaching you how to state a hypothesis correctly, especially when you're using null hypothesis. You say there is no statistically significant difference between the mean scores of students taught concept of sampling techniques with visual or zoom method and those taught with a physical or traditional method. This is a typical way of stating a standard null hypothesis. And in brackets, you put P less than 0.05. That means probability, you're testing this at this probability level. There is no significant relationship between students' access to further mathematics education through visual learning facilities and socioeconomic background of the parents. As another way. Then if you want to develop another some hypothesis, the mean achievement scores of students with prior knowledge of sampling techniques and those without prior knowledge will not differ significantly statistically. In brackets, probability less than 0.5. That's where you are testing for the probability or for the significant difference. Then another way of stating this hypothesis too is, as I've shown here, there is no significant difference between the mean achievement scores of students with prior knowledge of sampling techniques and those with the prior knowledge. As already explained. Hypothesis 3. Transformational leadership will not be a statistically significant factor in the administrative effectiveness of principals as measured by teacher mean ratings. In bracket as usual. In another form, it can be stated like this. There is no significant relationship between transformational leadership and administrative effectiveness of principals as measured by teacher mean rating at this level, 0.05. It is in a null form that hypotheses are tested. I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. It's very, very important that if you want to test for hypothesis, make sure it is not stated in a research form, it is stated in a null form. Null hypotheses are usually tested against alternative hypotheses. We'll come to the end of this lecture. In our next lecture, we are going to look at alternative hypotheses. Thank you.